In Austin's gleaming NordicFlow Technologies office, a quiet linguistics graduate was about to expose systematic workplace abuse. What started as her first day at a prestigious tech startup took a shocking turn when she came face to face with her CEO's hidden cruelty. Maya Thompson wasn't your typical junior developer. For years, she had spent her life mastering Scandinavian languages in Copenhagen, known for her ability to decode complex linguistic patterns. When she encountered Erik Davidson speaking Danish during meetings, she had no idea she was walking into psychological warfare. Maya's decision to secretly record his discriminatory comments would lead to a landmark legal battle that transformed employment law forever. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Maya's hands trembled slightly as she gripped the glass door handle of NordicFlow Technologies, the metal cold against her palm despite Austin's morning heat. The building's facade stretched upward in clean lines of white stone and expansive windows, its Scandinavian-inspired minimalism both beautiful and intimidating. She'd spent the weekend rehearsing introductions, practicing technical terminology, and trying to convince herself she belonged here. The lobby embraced her with understated elegance. Pale wood floors, geometric furniture in muted blues and grays, and abstract art that probably cost more than her entire graduate school budget. A receptionist with perfectly styled blonde hair looked up from behind a floating desk that seemed to defy physics. Maya Thompson? The woman's smile was professional but warm. Welcome to NordicFlow, I'm Sarah. Erik's excited to meet you. Maya nodded, not trusting her voice. 3 months ago, she'd been analyzing Old Norse verb conjugations in a cramped university library. Now she was supposed to debug JavaScript and build user interfaces. The transition from linguistics PhD candidate to junior software engineer felt like trying to speak a foreign language, which was ironic, considering languages were supposed to be her specialty. Just breathe, she whispered to herself, a habit from her Copenhagen days when Danish conversations would flow too quickly for her to follow. The elevator carried her to the 3rd floor, where Sarah led her through an open workspace that buzzed with quiet productivity. Developers hunched over multiple monitors, their fingers dancing across mechanical keyboards in rhythms that sounded almost musical. Maya's imposter syndrome flared. These people had been coding since high school. She'd learned Python 6 months ago. Maya, a voice called out, friendly and warm. A Korean-American man in his 30s approached, extending his hand. David Park, senior developer, heard you're joining the back-end team. His handshake was firm, his smile genuine. Maya felt some tension leave her shoulders. Nice to meet you. I'm looking forward to working with everyone. Don't worry about the learning curve, David said, as if reading her mind. We've all been where you are. Tom Bradley over there. He gestured toward a tall man with graying temples. He'll be your mentor. Used to teach at UT before he got into tech. Tom Bradley looked up from his screen, offering a reassuring nod. Something about his demeanor reminded Maya of her favorite professors, patient, observant, genuinely interested in helping others learn. Maya Thompson? Another voice, this one carrying an unmistakable authority. Maya turned to see a man striding toward them with the kind of confidence that filled rooms. Tall, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent. With salt and pepper hair and blue eyes that seemed to catalog everything they saw. Erik Davidson, he said, extending his hand. Welcome to NordicFlow. His handshake was firm, his presence magnetic. Maya understood immediately why he'd successfully raised $40 million in venture capital. Erik Davidson commanded attention without trying, spoke with the measured cadence of someone accustomed to being listened to. Thank you, Mr. Davidson. I'm excited to be here. Please, call me Erik. We're pretty informal around here. His smile revealed perfect teeth. I understand you have an interesting background. Linguistics, right? Always fascinating to bring different perspectives into tech. Maya nodded, surprised he'd remembered that detail from her resume. I spent some time in Europe studying language patterns, hoping to apply some of that analytical thinking to coding. Excellent. Denmark's got a fantastic education system. Spent some time in Copenhagen myself during business school. Erik's eyes lit up with what seemed like genuine interest. Beautiful country. Wonderful people. An hour later, Maya found herself in the main conference room for the weekly all-hands meeting. The space embodied the same minimalist aesthetic as the rest of the building. White walls, blonde wood table, ergonomic chairs in soft gray. Erik stood at the front, reviewing quarterly metrics and upcoming product launches. Maya tried to focus on the presentation, but her mind kept wandering to the stack of JavaScript tutorials she'd bookmarked. She was taking notes on user engagement statistics when Erik's voice shifted slightly, his tone becoming more casual. Sarah's design work on the mobile interface looks promising, he said, gesturing toward mock-ups on the screen. Though I have some concerns about her attention to detail. Hun ikke særlig skarp, HVISI 4-star, vad jeg manner. Maya's pen stopped moving. Her blood seemed to pause in her veins. She's not very sharp, if you know what I mean. The words hung in the air, delivered in perfect Danish with a slight Jutland accent. Erik continued his presentation as if nothing had happened, but Maya's world had tilted. She glanced around the room. Everyone else looked focused, engaged, unaware that their CEO had just insulted a colleague in a foreign language. David's API work has been solid, Erik continued. Consistent delivery times, clean code, though his communication style could use some work. Handtaler for Magit I Mater, typisk Asiatisk. He talks too much in meetings, typical Asian. Maya's heart hammered against her ribs. She kept her expression neutral, but inside, shock gave way to a sick understanding. Erik Davidson wasn't just bilingual. He was weaponizing his language skills, using Danish as a shield for cruelty. The meeting continued for another 20 minutes. Erik made 3 more comments in Danish, each one a small cruelty disguised as sophistication. Maya absorbed every word, her linguistics training automatically cataloging his accent, his word choices, his casual bigotry. When the meeting ended, colleagues filed out discussing project timelines and deadlines. Maya remained seated, her notebook clutched in suddenly sweaty palms. She had a choice to make. She could pretend she hadn't understood, could blend into the background like she always did. Or she could acknowledge that her year in Copenhagen, her thesis on Scandinavian language structures, her supposedly soft academic skills, had just given her a window into something dark. Maya closed her notebook slowly, her decision crystallizing. She would watch, she would listen, and she would remember every word. Maya's notebook had become her silent companion, its pages filling with what appeared to be routine work observations, but were actually careful documentation of Erik Davidson's linguistic cruelty. 3 weeks into her employment at NordicFlow, the pattern had crystallized with disturbing clarity. Tuesday morning's product review meeting provided another data point. Erik praised the front-end team's latest build, his public enthusiasm genuine and infectious. Then, as he reviewed individual contributions, his voice shifted into that familiar casual tone. Jessica's component library shows real innovation, he said, his smile warm as he gestured toward a young developer near the back. Though I wonder about her long-term commitment. Hun ser ud som typen, der bliver gravid og forsvinder. She looks like the type who'll get pregnant and disappear. Maya's pen moved steadily across her notepad, disguising her Danish transcription as meeting notes. Around the table, colleagues nodded, along with Erik's apparent praise, unaware of the poison hidden beneath his words. Ashley Williams sat 2 seats away, Erik's 24-year-old assistant, whose enthusiasm for her first corporate job had begun to dim in ways Maya was starting to understand. During Erik's Danish commentary, Ashley's posture invariably shifted, shoulders tensing, eyes dropping to her laptop screen, fingers drumming anxiously against her coffee cup. Ashley's been handling our client communications beautifully, Erik continued, his public voice returning, real attention to detail. Then, almost as an afterthought, Selvom hun ikke den skarpeste kniv I skuffen. Typisk blonde bimbo. Though she's not the sharpest knife in the drawer. Typical blonde bimbo. Maya watched Ashley's face carefully. The young woman didn't understand the words, but her body language suggested she felt their weight. The dismissive tone, the slight pause afterward, the way Erik's attention moved past her as if she'd suddenly become invisible. The meeting ended with assignments and deadlines, but Maya lingered, pretending to organize her notes while observing the room's dynamics. David Park approached her workstation later that afternoon, his expression thoughtful. "You settling in okay?" he asked, perching on the edge of her desk. "I know the transition from academia can be rough." Maya looked up from her code editor, grateful for the interruption. "It's challenging, but good challenging." "Everyone's been helpful." David nodded, but something in his expression suggested deeper currents. "Erik seems to have taken a liking to you." "That's good. He can be particular about new hires." "He's certainly charismatic," Maya said carefully. "Yeah." David's voice carried a note she couldn't quite identify. "Just watch yourself around him. He's got this way of making people feel simultaneously valued and vulnerable. Keeps everyone slightly off balance." Maya's fingers paused above her keyboard. "Has he always been like that?" David glanced around the open office, ensuring their conversation remained private. "When I started 4 years ago, he was different. Still demanding, but more collaborative. Success changed him. Or maybe it just revealed who he'd always been underneath." That evening, Maya sat in her small apartment with her cat, Luna, curled in her lap, reviewing her growing collection of observations. The Danish comments followed a clear pattern: public praise followed by private degradation, always targeting women, minorities, or anyone Erik perceived as intellectually inferior. The man was conducting psychological warfare in plain sight, protected by linguistic camouflage. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "How's the new job, sweetheart? Are you using those language skills?" Maya stared at the message for a long moment before typing back, "In ways I never expected." The next morning brought another revelation. During the weekly code review, Erik examined Tom Bradley's latest project, a security module that had taken weeks to perfect. Tom, the veteran programmer who'd become Maya's informal mentor, presented his work with quiet pride. "Solid architecture, Tom," Erik said publicly. "Really thoughtful approach to the authentication system." Then, his voice dropping into Danish. "Selvfølgelig er det langsomt og gammeldags. Gamle hunde kan ikke lære nye tricks." Of course it's slow and old-fashioned. Old dogs can't learn new tricks. Maya felt a flash of anger that surprised her with its intensity. Tom Bradley had spent hours helping her understand complex programming concepts, sharing his knowledge with genuine generosity. To hear him dismissed so casually felt like a personal attack. Ashley Williams raised her hand tentatively. "Should I schedule follow-up meetings for the implementation timeline?" Erik's public smile returned. "Great thinking, Ashley. Always looking ahead." Then, "Hun prover så hart at virke intelligent. Det næsten intellect." She tries so hard to seem intelligent. It's almost pathetic. Maya's pen moved automatically, capturing every syllable while her conscience screamed. She was becoming complicit through inaction, a silent witness to systematic emotional abuse. But speaking up would mean revealing her linguistic abilities, ending her unique position as an inadvertent spy. That afternoon, she made her first real decision. During her lunch break, she activated her phone's voice recorder and slipped it into her blazer pocket. If Erik Davidson wanted to weaponize language, she would turn his own words against him. The question was no longer whether his behavior was wrong. It was how long she could bear to document it before taking action. Maya's hands shook as she positioned her phone in her blazer pocket, the voice recording app activated and waiting. 2 days had passed since her decision to begin documenting Erik's Danish commentary. 2 days of rehearsing the mechanics of covert surveillance while questioning every ethical boundary she was about to cross. The Friday morning leadership meeting would be her first real test. As junior staff, she typically wouldn't attend, but Erik had specifically requested her presence to discuss the user interface specifications for their new client portal. She'd spent the previous evening practicing natural movements, reaching for her coffee, adjusting her blazer, gesturing while speaking, any motion that might accidentally mute or stop the recording. "Maya," Erik's voice carried across the conference room as she entered. "Perfect timing. I was just telling the team about your background in linguistic analysis. Thought you might have insights on our user communication strategy." She felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I'd be happy to help however I can." The irony wasn't lost on her. Erik praising her linguistic abilities while remaining oblivious to how she was about to use them against him. She settled into her chair, hyper-aware of the phone's weight against her ribs, of the red recording indicator hidden beneath fabric. For the first 20 minutes, the meeting proceeded normally. Budget discussions, timeline revisions, client feedback reviews. Maya began to wonder if she'd made a mistake, if Erik's Danish commentary was less frequent than she'd observed. Then Ashley Williams entered with the quarterly performance reports. "Sorry I'm late," Ashley said breathlessly, her arms full of binders and laptops. The printer was acting up again. Erik's public response was understanding, accommodating. "No problem at all, Ashley. We know how reliable our office equipment can be." He gestured for her to take the empty chair beside the projection screen. But as Ashley fumbled with her materials, attempting to look professional while clearly flustered, Erik's voice shifted into that familiar casual register. "Hun som en klunta HVALP. Hurdan fik hun over huvudet detta job?" She's like a clumsy puppy. How did she even get this job? Maya's training in phonetic transcription kicked in automatically, her mind cataloging every nuance of Erik's pronunciation, while her heart hammered against her ribs. The recording was working. She was actually capturing this. The client satisfaction scores look promising, Erik continued in English, reviewing Ashley's data. "Though I think we need to dig deeper into the user experience feedback." His tone remained professional, encouraging even, while Maya processed the cognitive dissonance of watching someone speak kindly while thinking cruelly. David Park raised a question about mobile responsiveness, launching into a technical explanation that demonstrated his deep understanding of the platform architecture. Maya had learned to respect David's expertise over the past month. His code was clean, his solutions elegant, his willingness to help junior developers genuine. Erik nodded along appreciatively, asking thoughtful follow-up questions. Then, as David concluded his presentation, "Intressant tillgång, selvom han alltid skall komplicera tingene. Asiater har denna trang till att vis deras intelligence." Interesting approach, though he always has to complicate things. Asians have this urge to show off their intelligence. The casual racism hit Maya like a physical blow. She managed to maintain her expression, but inside, anger and disgust warred with excitement at having captured such clear evidence. Her phone continued recording silently, preserving every syllable of Erik's bigotry. The meeting stretched on for another hour. Maya documented 3 more Danish comments: criticism of a female developer's emotional coding style, mockery of the marketing team's predictable campaign concepts, and a particularly cruel assessment of the HR director's weight. Each comment followed the same pattern: public praise or professional neutrality, followed by private cruelty delivered in a language Erik assumed no one understood. When the meeting finally ended, Maya remained seated until the room emptied, ostensibly reviewing her notes while actually stopping the recording and checking the file quality. 47 minutes of audio, crystal clear, documenting systematic workplace abuse disguised as multilingual sophistication. That evening, she sat in her apartment with headphones on, transcribing Erik's Danish comments with academic precision. Her linguistics training had taught her to approach language objectively, but listening to the recordings again, she felt the full emotional weight of what she'd witnessed. This wasn't just inappropriate behavior, it was psychological warfare conducted with surgical precision. Her phone rang, interrupting her transcription work. Her mother's name appeared on the screen. "Hi, Mom. Maya, sweetheart, you sound tired. Everything okay with the new job?" Maya stared at her notebook, filled with Danish transcriptions and English translations, evidence of systematic cruelty that no one else could understand. "It's complicated. I'm learning things I didn't expect to learn." Such as? How power works. How people can hide their true nature behind intelligence and charm. How language can be used as a weapon. Dr. Linda Thompson was quiet for a moment. "That sounds like more than just technical skills, honey. Are you safe? Are you being treated well?" Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Maya closed her eyes, thinking of Ashley Williams' anxious fidgeting, of David Park's unconscious tensing whenever Erik spoke Danish. of Tom Bradley's gradual withdrawal from team discussions. I'm safe. But others might not be, and I'm in a unique position to help them. Then you know what you need to do, her mother said gently. You've always had a gift for understanding what people really mean when they speak. Maybe it's time to use that gift for something bigger than academic research. After ending the call, Maya stared at her growing collection of evidence. She had the recordings, but she needed more: context, patterns, documentation of the broader impact. She needed to understand not just what Erik was saying, but how his hidden cruelty was affecting the people around him. She opened her laptop and began researching employment law in Texas, specifically focusing on workplace harassment and discrimination. Her academic skills in research and analysis were about to serve a very different purpose than she'd ever imagined. Maya's apartment had transformed into a makeshift investigation center. Her dining table disappeared beneath legal printouts, transcription notes, and timeline charts mapping Erik's behavioral patterns. 2 months of covert recording had produced over 30 hours of audio evidence, each Danish comment meticulously translated and cataloged by date, target, and context. The scope of Erik's linguistic abuse was staggering. Maya had documented systematic targeting of female employees, racial minorities, older workers, and anyone Erik perceived as intellectually inferior. His cruelty was surgical, designed to undermine confidence while maintaining plausible deniability through language barriers. She'd spent the previous weekend researching employment attorneys, focusing on firms with experience in discrimination cases. Rebecca Martinez's name kept appearing in legal databases, particularly in cases involving linguistic discrimination and workplace harassment. Her firm, Martinez and Associates, had successfully represented several high-profile whistleblowers against tech companies. Maya scrolled through Rebecca's case history, noting a pattern of victories against corporate defendants who'd used language, culture, or communication barriers to mask discriminatory behavior. One case involved a pharmaceutical company where executives made derogatory comments about employees in Portuguese, assuming their American colleagues wouldn't understand. Rebecca had secured a 7-figure settlement. Her phone buzzed with a text from David Park. "Coffee later? Noticed you've seemed stressed lately." Maya studied the message, weighing her response. David had become her closest ally at NordicFlow, but revealing her investigation would put him in an impossible position. Still, she needed witnesses who could testify to Erik's behavioral patterns, even if they couldn't understand his Danish commentary. At the coffee shop down the street from NordicFlow's offices, David sat across from her with genuine concern in his eyes. "You've been different lately." "Distracted. Is the workload too much?" "Because I can talk to Tom about redistributing some of your projects." Maya stirred her latte absently, choosing her words carefully. "It's not the technical work. I'm actually enjoying the coding challenges. It's more observational." "Observational? Have you noticed anything unusual about Erik's communication style? The way he interacts with different employees?" David's expression shifted, becoming guarded. "That's a loaded question, Maya. What are you getting at?" "Just patterns. The way he speaks to Ashley versus how he speaks to you versus how he speaks to Tom. There seems to be inconsistencies." David was quiet for a long moment, studying his coffee cup. Erik's always been demanding. Some people handle it better than others. "But have you noticed anything else? Any verbal patterns that seem off?" "Maya." David's voice carried a warning. "I've got twin toddlers and a mortgage. Whatever you're thinking about, Erik, whatever you've observed, I need this job. My family needs this job." The conversation crystallized Maya's isolation. Even potential allies were trapped by economic necessities. She was truly alone in her knowledge of Erik's linguistic crimes. That afternoon brought the incident that would finally push Maya toward action. Ashley Williams, who had been growing increasingly withdrawn over the past weeks, submitted her resignation letter during the weekly staff meeting. "I've accepted a position with a startup in San Antonio," Ashley announced, her voice steady but her hands trembling slightly. "My last day will be next Friday." Erik's public response was gracious, professional. We'll miss your contributions, Ashley. Best of luck with your new opportunity. But as Ashley gathered her materials, preparing to leave the conference room, Erik's voice dropped into Danish. Endelig. Hun var alligevel for SVAG til dette job. Kvinder som hende er spilt af-tid. Finally. She was too weak for this job anyway. Women like her are a waste of time. Maya watched Ashley's shoulders sag slightly, as if she could feel the weight of words she couldn't understand. The young woman had been slowly crushed by months of linguistic abuse, driven from her job by cruelty she couldn't identify or defend against. That evening, Maya made her first contact with Rebecca Martinez's office. The paralegal who answered seemed accustomed to sensitive inquiries, scheduling a confidential consultation for the following week without requiring detailed explanations over the phone. Maya spent the intervening days organizing her evidence into a coherent presentation. She created timelines showing the correlation between Erik's Danish comments and employee performance metrics, resignation rates, and psychological stress indicators. The pattern was undeniable. Erik's linguistic abuse was systematically destroying workplace morale and driving away talent. She also began documenting the broader impact of Erik's behavior. Performance reviews showed that employees targeted by his Danish commentary consistently received lower ratings, despite objective measures showing their work quality remained steady. Turnover rates among women and minorities had increased by 30% over the past year, while white male employees showed greater job satisfaction and advancement opportunities. The night before her appointment with Rebecca Martinez, Maya sat in her apartment reviewing her evidence one final time. Hours of recorded audio, pages of transcriptions, statistical analysis showing the human cost of Erik's linguistic warfare. She had built an airtight case, documenting systematic workplace abuse. But pursuing justice would mean exposing her own deception, ending her career at NordicFlow, and facing potential legal challenges about surveillance ethics. Erik Davidson had wealth, connections, and a team of expensive lawyers. Maya had truth, evidence, and a burning sense of moral obligation. She thought about Ashley Williams, driven from her job by abuse she couldn't understand. About David Park, trapped by economic necessity and unable to speak up. About Tom Bradley, mocked for his age and experience. About every employee who had suffered under Erik's linguistic cruelty while believing they were working for a charismatic, successful leader. Maya opened her laptop and typed a brief email to Rebecca Martinez's office, confirming her appointment and indicating she had substantial evidence of systematic workplace discrimination involving foreign language abuse. She hit send before she could reconsider. The fight for justice was about to begin. Rebecca Martinez's office occupied the 15th floor of a downtown Austin high-rise, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering sweeping views of the city's sprawling landscape. Maya had expected something more dramatic. Dark wood paneling, intimidating law books, the kind of theatrical setting she'd seen in movies. Instead, she found a warmly lit space with comfortable seating, vibrant artwork, and an atmosphere that somehow managed to be both professional and welcoming. Rebecca herself defied Maya's expectations as well. Mid-40s, with silver-streaked black hair and intelligent brown eyes, she moved with the confident efficiency of someone accustomed to fighting powerful opponents. Her handshake was firm, her smile genuine. "Ms. Thompson, thank you for coming in. I understand you have a rather unique employment situation to discuss." Maya settled into the leather chair across from Rebecca's desk, her laptop bag heavy with evidence. "It's complicated. I'm not sure where to begin." "Begin with why you're here. What happened that made you decide to seek legal counsel?" Maya took a breath, organizing her thoughts. "My boss has been systematically abusing employees using a foreign language, Danish, believing no one in the office understands what he's saying. But I do understand. And I've been recording him." Rebecca's eyebrows rose slightly, but her expression remained professionally neutral. "How long has this been going on? The abuse?" "I think it's been happening since I started. Possibly longer." "My recording efforts?" 2 months. "I have over 30 hours of audio evidence." "And your Danish comprehension comes from?" "Graduate studies in linguistics at University of Oregon, with a year-long research fellowship in Copenhagen. I was working on Scandinavian language structures for my master's thesis. Rebecca leaned back in her chair, her fingers steepled thoughtfully. This is certainly unique. I've handled linguistic discrimination cases before, but never one where the employee had covert linguistic knowledge. Walk me through a typical incident. Maya opened her laptop, accessing her meticulously organized files. Here's a representative example from last week's product meeting. She played a carefully selected audio clip, Erik's voice clear and professional, as he praised a colleague's work in English, followed immediately by his Danish assessment calling the same colleague incompetent and questioning whether minorities belonged in tech roles. Rebecca listened intently, her expression growing more serious. Your translation is accurate? Completely. I can provide linguistic analysis of his accent, vocabulary choices, even regional dialectical markers if needed. This isn't casual conversation, it's systematic psychological warfare. The legal implications are significant, Rebecca said, pulling up case law on her computer screen. Workplace harassment, discrimination based on protected classes, intentional infliction of emotional distress. The foreign language component adds complexity, but also strength. It demonstrates premeditation and sophistication in the abuse. Maya felt a flutter of hope. So you think we have a case? Potentially a very strong case. But we need to address several challenges first. Rebecca's tone became more cautious. The recordings were made without Erik Davidson's consent. Texas is a one-party consent state, meaning you can legally record conversations you're participating in, but workplace surveillance raises additional ethical and legal questions. I researched that. Since I was present for all the recorded conversations and they occurred in common workplace areas, the recordings should be admissible. That's correct, but Davidson's attorneys will attack your credibility and methods. They'll argue you violated workplace trust, engaged in espionage, potentially even industrial spying, depending on what else was discussed in those meetings. Maya hadn't considered that angle, so the recordings might not be enough. The recordings are powerful evidence, but we need corroborating witnesses who can testify to Davidson's behavioral patterns, even if they can't understand his Danish comments. Changes in workplace atmosphere, employee reactions, patterns of favoritism or discrimination. I have colleagues who've witnessed his behavior. One in particular, David Park, has worked there for 4 years and seen the evolution of Erik's management style. Rebecca made notes on her legal pad. What about the direct victims of his comments? Employees he's targeted? Several have already left the company. Ashley Williams, his former assistant, resigned last week after months of what I now understand was systematic abuse. She doesn't know what he was saying about her, but she felt the impact. That's crucial testimony. Former employees are often more willing to speak truth about hostile work environments. Rebecca paused, studying Maya's face. I need to ask this directly. Are you prepared for what pursuing this case will mean? Erik Davidson will fight back aggressively. Your employment at NordicFlow will end immediately. Your methods will be questioned publicly. This could impact your future career prospects in tech. Maya thought about Ashley Williams' defeated posture as she'd submitted her resignation. About David Park's fear of speaking up because of his family obligations. About every employee who'd suffered under Erik's linguistic cruelty while believing they were imagining the hostility. I can't continue to sit silent while he destroys people's careers and mental health. If I have the knowledge and evidence to stop him, don't I have an obligation to act? Rebecca smiled for the first time since Maya had begun explaining her situation. That's exactly what I hoped you'd say. In my experience, the clients who pursue justice out of moral conviction rather than personal vengeance tend to be the most credible witnesses. So you'll take the case? I'll take the case. But we need to be strategic about timing and approach. First, we'll need signed statements from current and former employees documenting patterns of discriminatory behavior. Second, we'll need expert testimony about the psychological impact of linguistic exclusion and abuse. Third, we'll need to prepare for a media battle. Cases like this rarely stay quiet. Maya felt the weight of her decision settling over her. What happens next? Next, you continue working at NordicFlow while we build our witness base and expert testimony. Document everything. but be even more careful about your surveillance activities. If Davidson suspects what you're doing, he'll take preemptive action. Rebecca handed Maya a business card with her direct phone number. Call me immediately if anything changes at work, if you're terminated, if Davidson's behavior escalates, if you feel unsafe in any way. From this moment forward, you're not just an employee documenting workplace abuse. You're a whistleblower preparing to challenge one of Austin's rising tech stars. Maya slipped the card into her wallet, next to her NordicFlow employee ID badge. The juxtaposition felt symbolic. Her old identity as a struggling junior developer alongside her new role as an agent of justice. One more thing, Rebecca said as Maya prepared to leave. Are you absolutely certain you want to do this? Once we file the lawsuit, there's no going back. Erik Davidson will use every resource at his disposal to destroy your credibility and reputation. Maya thought about her linguistics professors who taught her that language reveals truth, that understanding communication patterns could unlock hidden realities. She'd stumbled into the most important application of her academic training, and she couldn't turn away from it. I'm certain, whatever it costs me personally, it's worth it to stop him from destroying other people's lives. Rebecca extended her hand again. Then welcome to the fight, Maya Thompson. Let's go get some justice. Maya's hands trembled as she approached David Park's cubicle, her heart hammering against her ribs. 3 weeks had passed since her meeting with Rebecca Martinez. 3 weeks of careful planning and sleepless nights. The time had come to begin recruiting witnesses, a process that required revealing enough truth to secure cooperation without exposing the full scope of her investigation. David looked up from his code editor, concern immediately creasing his features. Maya, you look like you haven't slept in days. What's going on? She glanced around the open office, ensuring their conversation would remain private. Can we talk somewhere more secluded? Maybe the break room? David's expression grew more worried, but he followed her to the small kitchen area tucked behind the main workspace. Maya had timed this carefully, mid-afternoon, when most employees were deep in their coding zones and unlikely to interrupt. David, I need to ask you something important, and I need you to trust me. Maya kept her voice low, professional. Have you ever noticed patterns in Erik's behavior toward different employees? Differences in how he treats people based on gender, race, or other characteristics. David's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Maya, we talked about this before. I can't afford to. I'm not asking you to jeopardize your job. I'm asking if you'd be willing to document what you've observed if it became legally relevant. The words hung between them like a challenge. David studied her face, his analytical mind clearly processing implications. Legally relevant how? I'm consulting with an employment attorney about potential discrimination issues at NordicFlow. Your observations about workplace dynamics could be important evidence. David was quiet for a long moment, stirring his coffee absently. You're really doing this? You're actually going after Erik. I'm gathering information about potential legal violations. That's all I can say right now. Jesus, Maya! David ran his hand through his hair, a gesture she'd learned to recognize as his stress response. Do you understand what you're risking? Erik doesn't just fire people who cross him. He destroys their careers. I've seen it happen. Maya felt a chill. What do you mean? 2 years ago, a senior developer named Marcus Chen, no relation to the lawyer, raised concerns about Erik's management style with HR. Within a month, Marcus was terminated for quote, performance issues that materialized out of nowhere. Erik made sure Marcus couldn't find work at any other Austin tech company. The revelation hit Maya like a physical blow. Erik's cruelty extended beyond Danish insults to systematic career destruction. All the more reason why someone needs to stand up to him. David stared at her with something approaching admiration mixed with terror. You really think you can win against him? I think silence guarantees he'll keep destroying people. At least fighting back gives us a chance. That evening, Maya drove across town to meet Ashley Williams at a coffee shop in San Antonio. The young woman looked healthier than she had during her final weeks at NordicFlow. Color had returned to her cheeks, and her shoulders no longer carried the permanent tension Maya remembered. Ashley, thank you for agreeing to meet with me. Ashley smiled, though wariness flickered in her eyes. Your message was pretty mysterious. Something about workplace issues at NordicFlow? Maya chose her words carefully. I'm documenting patterns of discriminatory behavior there. I know you had some difficult experiences before you left. Ashley's expression darkened. That's an understatement. I spent months feeling like I was losing my mind. Erik would praise my work publicly, then I'd leave meetings feeling somehow diminished, like I'd been insulted without understanding how. Maya's pulse quickened. Can you describe that feeling more specifically? It was his tone, mostly, the way he'd speak during certain moments. Casual, almost dismissive. And his body language would shift. I started having panic attacks, questioning whether I was imagining things. Ashley paused, studying Maya's face. Why are you asking about this? Because you weren't imagining it. Erik was communicating in ways designed to undermine your confidence while maintaining plausible deniability. I don't understand. Maya took a breath, weighing how much to reveal. Erik has been making derogatory comments about employees in Danish, believing no one understands what he's saying. You felt the impact of his cruelty, even though you couldn't identify the source. Ashley's eyes widened. You speak Danish? I do, and I've been documenting his behavior. Would you be willing to speak with an employment attorney about your experiences? Tears began forming in Ashley's eyes, not sadness, but relief. I knew something was wrong. Everyone kept telling me I was being too sensitive, that I should be grateful for the opportunity, but I knew something was happening that I couldn't see. You were being systematically psychologically abused. And you're not the only victim. Ashley wiped her eyes, her expression hardening with determination. What do you need me to do? Maya handed her Rebecca Martinez's business card. Call this number. Tell her Maya Thompson referred you. She'll explain everything. The drive back to Austin gave Maya time to process the day's conversations. David's revelation about Marcus Chen had shaken her. Erik's retaliation capabilities extended far beyond workplace harassment into career assassination. But Ashley's willingness to testify, her relief at finally understanding her experience, reinforced Maya's conviction that justice was worth the risk. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. How are you holding up, sweetheart? Your voice sounded strained during our last call. Maya pulled over to respond safely. Fighting a battle I'm not sure I can win, but I have to try. The response came quickly. The bravest students I've taught were never the ones who knew they'd succeed. They were the ones who knew the fight was necessary regardless of the outcome. That night, Maya sat in her apartment reviewing her growing network of potential witnesses and evidence. David Park's reluctant willingness to testify about workplace patterns. Ashley Williams' emotional testimony about systematic psychological abuse. Her own recordings documenting explicit discriminatory language. Rebecca Martinez's legal expertise and strategic planning. Against them stood Erik Davidson's wealth, connections, and willingness to destroy anyone who challenged his authority. The battle ahead would test not just Maya's evidence, but her courage, her integrity, and her faith in the possibility of justice. Maya opened her laptop and began drafting detailed summaries of her conversations with David and Ashley, preparing the witness statements that would form the foundation of her case. Each word brought her closer to the point of no return, the moment when she would transform from silent observer to active combatant in a war she was far from certain she could win. But Ashley Williams' relief at finally understanding her abuse, David Park's recognition that silence enabled Erik's cruelty, and her mother's reminder about the necessity of fighting regardless of outcomes, all pointed toward the same conclusion. Some battles were worth fighting precisely because victory wasn't guaranteed. Maya's phone buzzed at 6:47 a.m. with a call from Rebecca Martinez, the attorney's voice tight with controlled excitement. It's done. The lawsuit was filed 20 minutes ago. How quickly can you get to my office? Maya sat up in bed, Luna protesting the sudden movement. Filed? Already? Erik Davidson's attorneys work fast, and we needed to establish our legal position before he could take preemptive action. Get dressed and get here. The storm is about to hit. By the time Maya reached Rebecca's office, the attorney had already fielded calls from 3 reporters and Erik's legal team. The morning sunlight streaming through the windows seemed harsher somehow, as if reality itself had sharpened overnight. NordicFlow's board was notified an hour ago, Rebecca explained, spreading documents across her conference table. Erik's been placed on administrative leave pending the investigation, which means he's going to be very angry and very motivated to discredit you. Maya's phone had been buzzing continuously during her drive downtown. Missed calls from David Park, Tom Bradley, even colleagues she barely knew. How long before this becomes public knowledge? Probably already has. Austin's tech community is small and interconnected. By noon, everyone in the industry will know that Maya Thompson, junior developer, has accused Erik Davidson, rising star CEO, of systematic workplace discrimination using foreign language abuse. The words hung in the air like a verdict. Maya felt the weight of her decision crystallizing. There was no path back to anonymity, no way to undo what she'd set in motion. Rebecca's phone rang and she answered with crisp professionalism. Martinez. Yes, I represent Ms. Thompson. No comment at this time. All inquiries should go through my office. She hung up and looked at Maya. That was Jake Rodriguez from Austin Tech Weekly. He's been investigating workplace culture issues in local startups. Interested in talking to him? Maya thought about Ashley Williams, driven from her job by abuse she couldn't understand. About David Park, terrified of speaking up because of his family obligations. About every employee who'd suffered under Erik's linguistic cruelty. Yes, people need to understand what's been happening. 2 hours later, Maya sat across from Jake Rodriguez in a quiet corner of a downtown cafe, the journalist's recorder placed between them like a bridge between her private pain and public justice. Jake was younger than she'd expected, probably early 30s, with intelligent eyes and the focused intensity of someone who'd built a career on exposing hidden truths. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, Jake said, reviewing his notes. Erik Davidson has been making discriminatory comments in Danish during workplace meetings, believing no one understood what he was saying. But you understood every word because of your linguistics background. That's correct. And you recorded these comments for 2 months before deciding to take legal action. Maya nodded, acutely aware that her next words would be printed and scrutinized by thousands of readers. I documented systematic psychological abuse conducted through linguistic manipulation. Erik Davidson weaponized his bilingual abilities to create a hostile work environment while maintaining plausible deniability. Jake leaned forward. Your critics will say you violated workplace trust, that you engaged in surveillance and espionage. How do you respond to that? Maya had rehearsed this answer with Rebecca. I documented illegal discriminatory behavior that was harming my colleagues. When someone uses language as a weapon, responding with linguistic knowledge isn't espionage, it's self-defense. What do you hope to accomplish with this lawsuit? I want Erik Davidson held accountable for his actions. I want policies implemented to prevent linguistic discrimination. And I want other employees who've experienced similar abuse to know they're not imagining things, that their experiences are valid and actionable. Jake's article went live at 3 p.m., just as Maya was returning to NordicFlow to clear out her personal belongings. The headline read, Local Developer Exposes CEO's Linguistic Discrimination Through Secret Recordings, and within minutes, her phone exploded with notifications. The office atmosphere was electric with tension. Conversations stopped as Maya walked through the workspace, some colleagues offering supportive nods, while others avoided eye contact entirely. David Park approached her cubicle as she packed her few personal items. Maya, I wanted to say. He lowered his voice, glancing around nervously. What you're doing is brave. Scary as hell, but brave. Are you willing to testify about what you've observed? David's face tightened with internal conflict. I've been talking to my wife about it. We're scared about the financial implications, but we can't keep pretending Erik's behavior is normal. Yes, I'll testify. Tom Bradley appeared at her other side, his weathered face showing deep concern. Maya, I've been in tech for 20 years, and I've seen a lot of workplace dysfunction. But what Erik's been doing... He shook his head. I should have spoken up sooner. I'll support your case however I can. By 5 p.m., Maya's email inbox contained over 200 messages, support from strangers, interview requests from reporters, and a surprisingly vicious response from Erik's personal attorney threatening defamation suits if she continued making false and malicious statements. Rebecca called as Maya drove home. "How are you holding up?" "Overwhelmed, scared, but also relieved that it's finally in the open. The response has been significant. I've received calls from 6 other current or former NordicFlow employees who want to share their experiences. 3 other employment attorneys have reached out with similar cases at different companies. You've opened a door that was desperately needed." That evening, Maya sat in her apartment reading online reactions to Jake Rodriguez's article. The comments section was a battleground, supporters praising her courage, while critics questioned her methods and motives. One comment particularly stung. "Sounds like a disgruntled employee who couldn't hack it in tech and decided to destroy her boss's reputation for revenge." But mixed among the criticism were messages that made her eyes water with gratitude. A female developer in Seattle shared her own experience with linguistic discrimination by Spanish-speaking managers. A Korean-American programmer described similar exclusion tactics using Korean language. An older developer thanked her for exposing ageism disguised as international sophistication. Maya's phone buzzed with a text from Ashley Williams. "Saw the article. So proud of you for having the courage I couldn't find. Ready to fight this together." Another message came from her mother. "Watched the local news coverage. You look strong and determined. Whatever happens next, know that you're fighting for everyone who's been silenced by people like Erik Davidson." Maya closed her laptop and looked out her apartment window at Austin's glittering skyline. Somewhere in those office buildings, Erik Davidson was probably meeting with expensive lawyers, planning his counterattack against the junior developer who'd dared to challenge his authority. The battle was just beginning, but for the first time since she'd started documenting Erik's linguistic abuse, Maya felt like she wasn't fighting alone. The truth was finally in the open, witnesses were stepping forward, and the legal system would have its chance to deliver justice. Whether that justice would come at a price she could afford remained to be seen. Maya's hands were steady as she faced Michael Chen across the mahogany conference table, the defense attorney's questions sharp and calculated. 3 months had passed since filing the lawsuit. 3 months of depositions, document discovery, and legal maneuvering that had transformed her from anonymous developer into reluctant public figure. "Ms. Thompson," Chen's voice carried the kind of authority that came from 2 decades of defending corporate clients. "You've testified that you recorded Mr. Davidson without his knowledge for over 2 months. Isn't it true that you violated your employment agreement's confidentiality clause?" Rebecca Martinez tensed slightly beside Maya, but Maya had prepared for this line of attack. "I documented illegal discriminatory behavior that was creating a hostile work environment. Confidentiality agreements don't protect criminal activity." "Criminal activity?" Chen's eyebrows rose with theatrical skepticism. "Mr. Davidson made comments in his native language during workplace meetings. Since when is speaking Danish a crime?" Maya met his gaze steadily. "Since those Danish comments constituted systematic harassment based on protected characteristics, including gender, race, and age. The language was simply his method of concealment." Chen smiled coldly, consulting his notes. "You claim to be fluent in Danish, but you've never been employed as a translator or interpreter. Your graduate work was in linguistic analysis, not practical language application. How can this court trust your translations of complex conversational Danish?" "Because I lived in Copenhagen for a year conducting research, I'm familiar with colloquial expressions and regional dialects, and I can provide phonological analysis of Mr. Davidson's speech patterns that verify my translation's accuracy." "Or," Chen countered smoothly, "you could be mistranslating innocent comments to support a vindictive lawsuit against an employer who terminated you for performance issues." Rebecca objected before Maya could respond. "Counsel is testifying rather than questioning." "Sustained," the court reporter noted for the record. Chen shifted tactics. "Ms. Thompson, isn't it true that you were struggling with your transition from academia to software development? That you felt inadequate compared to your technically trained colleagues?" Maya felt heat rise in her cheeks but kept her voice level. I was learning new skills, yes. That's normal for any career transition. And isn't it possible that your feelings of professional inadequacy led you to misinterpret normal workplace feedback as personal attacks? Mr. Davidson's comments weren't feedback. They were explicit bigotry delivered in Danish because he assumed no one would understand. Calling female employees worthless trash and Asian colleagues typical show-offs isn't constructive criticism, it's hate speech. Chen's expression flickered, the first crack in his polished demeanor. Maya's detailed examples, backed by audio evidence and expert linguistic analysis, were harder to dismiss than he'd anticipated. The questioning continued for another hour, Chen attacking Maya's credibility, her methods, and her motives, while she systematically defended every element of her case. When the deposition finally ended, Maya felt drained, but vindicated. Her evidence was stronger than Chen's rhetorical challenges. Dr. Patricia Hoffman took the witness stand the following week, her academic credentials and expert testimony lending scientific weight to Maya's accusations. The psychology professor had reviewed hours of Maya's recordings, analyzing both the content and context of Erik's Danish commentary. Linguistic exclusion is a sophisticated form of psychological warfare, Dr. Hoffman explained to the packed courtroom. By using a foreign language to deliver hostile messages, the perpetrator creates a toxic environment while maintaining plausible deniability. Victims experience the emotional impact without understanding the source, leading to anxiety, self-doubt, and degraded job performance. Rebecca guided Dr. Hoffman through her analysis of workplace dynamics at NordicFlow, the correlation between Erik's Danish comments and employee turnover, and the broader psychological impact of linguistic discrimination. When Chen cross-examined, he found himself arguing against peer-reviewed research and established psychological principles. David Park's testimony proved crucial. His 4 years at NordicFlow provided historical context for Erik's behavioral evolution, and his technical expertise lent credibility to his observations about workplace dynamics. Over the past 2 years, I watched Erik become more controlling, more dismissive of employees he considered inferior. David testified, his voice steady despite the personal risk. The pattern Maya documented through her recordings matched exactly what I'd observed: systematic targeting of women, minorities, and older workers through subtle but consistent hostile behavior. Chen's cross-examination focused on David's financial motivations and his friendship with Maya. But David's straightforward responses and technical background made him difficult to discredit. When Chen suggested David was lying to protect his job, David's response was devastating. I'm risking my job by testifying here today. If I were motivated by financial self-interest, I'd stay silent like I did for too long already. Ashley Williams provided the emotional centerpiece of Maya's case. Her testimony about the psychological impact of Erik's linguistic abuse, the anxiety attacks, the self-doubt, the gradual erosion of confidence, painted a human face on the legal abstractions of discrimination law. I started having panic attacks before every meeting with Erik, Ashley testified, tears streaming down her face. I couldn't understand why his praise felt like criticism, why I left every interaction feeling somehow diminished. Now I understand. He was systematically destroying my confidence in a language I couldn't comprehend. Chen's cross-examination of Ashley backfired spectacularly. His aggressive questioning about her emotional instability and professional inadequacy demonstrated exactly the kind of hostile treatment Erik's victims had endured. By the time Ashley left the witness stand, even the defense team looked uncomfortable with their own tactics. The technical evidence proved unassailable. Maya's linguistic analysis of Erik's Danish comments, supported by audio recordings and phonological breakdowns, created an indisputable record of systematic discrimination. Expert witnesses confirmed her translations, verified her linguistic credentials, and testified to the sophistication of her documentation methods. When Erik finally took the stand in his own defense, his polished CEO persona crumbled under Rebecca's cross-examination. His denials became less credible when confronted with audio evidence, his explanations more convoluted when pressed for details about his Danish comments. Mr. Davidson, Rebecca said, playing a particularly damning recording. You just heard yourself calling Ms. Williams quote 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 quote. How do you justify that language? Erik's response, claiming his words were taken out of context and mistranslated, rang hollow against the overwhelming evidence. When Rebecca played recording after recording of his discriminatory commentary, Erik's composure finally broke. Those conversations were private. She had no right to record them. Private conversations in workplace meetings, Mr. Davidson? Using company time and resources to deliver hostile messages about employees based on their gender and race? Erik's legal team requested a recess before he could inflict further damage on his own defense. That evening, Maya sat with Rebecca in the attorney's office, reviewing the day's proceedings. How do you think it went? Rebecca smiled, the first genuinely optimistic expression Maya had seen from her in weeks. I think Erik Davidson just lost his case. His testimony confirmed everything we've been arguing about his character and motives. The jury saw him for what he really is, a sophisticated bully who got caught using his linguistic abilities as weapons. Maya felt a mixture of exhaustion and vindication. Months of legal battle had taken their toll, but the truth was finally being heard. Erik's mask of charismatic leadership had been stripped away, revealing the cruel manipulation beneath. What happens next? Closing arguments, jury deliberation, and hopefully justice. You've done something extraordinary, Maya. You've exposed a form of discrimination that most people never even recognize, and you've done it with courage and integrity. Maya thought about Ashley Williams' tears of relief, David Park's decision to risk his career for truth, and her own transformation from anxious imposter to confident advocate. Whatever the jury decided, she'd already accomplished something important. She'd given voice to the voiceless and shed light on hidden cruelty. The battle was nearly over. Soon, justice would have its say. Maya's phone buzzed at 7:15 a.m. with a call from Rebecca Martinez, the attorney's voice carrying an excitement that made Maya's pulse quicken. Turn on Channel 8 News. Jake Rodriguez just broke a story that changes everything. Maya fumbled for her television remote, Luna protesting the sudden activity from her lap. The morning news anchor's serious expression filled the screen as a chyron read, NordicFlow CEO scandal widens. Multiple companies implicated. Jake Rodriguez appeared on screen, his investigative instincts having uncovered a story far larger than Maya's individual case. What began as one employee's complaint about linguistic discrimination has revealed a pattern of similar abuse across Austin's tech sector. 3 additional companies are now facing lawsuits involving executives who used foreign languages to mask discriminatory behavior. Maya's heart raced as Jake detailed the expanding scandal. A Vietnamese-American CEO who insulted employees in Vietnamese. A German startup founder who made anti-Semitic comments in German during board meetings. A Spanish-speaking executive who targeted Latino employees with cruel commentary they couldn't understand. Maya Thompson's courage in documenting Erik Davidson's Danish abuse has inspired other victims to come forward, Jake continued. Employment attorneys across Texas report a surge in linguistic discrimination cases, suggesting this form of workplace abuse is more widespread than previously recognized. Rebecca's voice returned to Maya's phone. 6 more former NordicFlow employees contacted my office yesterday. They're ready to testify about Erik's behavior patterns, even if they couldn't understand his Danish commentary. The case has become bigger than we ever imagined. Maya sank back into her couch, overwhelmed by the implications. Her secret recordings had exposed not just Erik's individual cruelty, but a systematic form of discrimination that had been hiding in plain sight across the tech industry. Her phone rang again. Ashley Williams, her voice bright with determination. Maya, have you seen the news? There are support groups forming for victims of linguistic discrimination. People are finally understanding that what we experienced was real, that it has a name. The courtroom was packed that afternoon as Rebecca presented the new evidence to Judge Harrison. Additional witnesses had come forward with stories that painted Erik's behavior as part of a broader pattern of sophisticated psychological abuse. Maria Santos, a former marketing coordinator, testified about Erik's Spanish comments questioning her intelligence and work ethic. I speak some Spanish, but not fluently enough to catch everything. I knew he was saying something about me, but I couldn't prove it. Hearing Maya's recordings gave me the courage to come forward with my own experience. James Wright, a former senior developer, described Erik's increasing hostility toward older employees, delivered through Danish commentary about their obsolescence and, quote, resistance to innovation. I started questioning my own competence, wondering if I was imagining the hostility in Erik's tone. Maya's case proved I wasn't paranoid. I was being systematically undermined. Michael Chen's defense strategy crumbled under the weight of additional testimony. His arguments about Maya's motives and methods became irrelevant when multiple witnesses corroborated patterns of discriminatory behavior spanning years. Erik's final courtroom appearance was a study in desperation. Faced with overwhelming evidence and mounting legal challenges from multiple fronts, he made one last attempt to discredit Maya's character and methods. "Your Honor," Erik said during his final testimony, his polished composure completely gone, "this woman violated every principle of workplace trust. She recorded private conversations, translated them maliciously, and destroyed a company I built from nothing." Rebecca's cross-examination was surgical. "Mr. Davidson, you've heard testimony from 8 former employees describing hostile treatment that correlates exactly with Ms. Thompson's recorded evidence. Are they all lying? They're all disgruntled former employees looking for payouts, including David Park, who still works for NordicFlow and testified at personal risk to his career." Erik's jaw tightened. "David has always been jealous of my success." Rebecca played a recording from the previous week, Erik's most recent Danish commentary, captured during a meeting with the board of directors investigating Maya's complaints. In it, Erik called Maya a vindictive bitch who doesn't understand business, and promised to destroy her career and reputation. "Mr. Davidson, this recording was made after you knew Ms. Thompson understood Danish, after you knew she was documenting your comments. Why did you continue making discriminatory statements?" Erik's face flushed red. "Because I was angry. She was destroying everything I'd worked for with her lies and translations." "So you admit these are accurate translations of your Danish comments?" The courtroom fell silent as Erik realized his mistake. For months, his defense had centered on questioning Maya's translation accuracy. His angry admission that her translations were correct demolished his remaining credibility. Rebecca pressed her advantage. "Mr. Davidson, isn't it true that you continued making discriminatory comments in Danish because you believed you could attack Ms. Thompson with impunity, just as you'd attacked other employees for years?" Erik's attorney objected desperately, but the damage was done. Erik had confirmed everything Maya had testified about his character, his methods, and his motivations. That evening, Maya sat in Rebecca's office reviewing the day's proceedings. The attorney's desk was covered with settlement offers, media requests, and legal documents from related cases across the tech industry. "Erik's legal team called an hour ago," Rebecca said. "They want to settle for 7 figures, plus policy changes at NordicFlow and a public apology." Maya considered the offer. Financial security, vindication, and the satisfaction of seeing Erik held accountable. But more important than personal compensation was the broader impact of her case. What about the other victims, the employees at other companies who are coming forward with similar stories? "Your case has created legal precedent for linguistic discrimination suits. Other attorneys are using our arguments and evidence as templates for their own cases. You've literally changed employment law in Texas." Maya felt a mixture of exhaustion and pride. Her decision to document Erik's Danish abuse had grown into something far larger than personal justice. It had become a movement for workplace dignity and linguistic rights. "I want to accept the settlement, but only if Erik agrees to testify in other linguistic discrimination cases. His cooperation could help convict other executives who've been using similar tactics." Rebecca smiled. "That's exactly what I hoped you'd say. Erik Davidson created this problem. He should be part of the solution." Maya's phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "Saw the news coverage. So proud of you for turning your linguistic gifts into a force for justice. You've changed more lives than you know." As Maya drove home through Austin's evening traffic, She reflected on her journey from anxious junior developer to reluctant civil rights pioneer. Her secret knowledge of Danish had become a weapon against discrimination, her academic skills had proven their real-world value, and her courage had inspired others to speak truth about hidden abuse. Erik Davidson's reign of linguistic terror was ending, but the broader fight for workplace justice was just beginning. Maya had lit a fire that would burn through the tech industry for years to come, exposing sophisticated forms of discrimination and giving voice to victims who'd been silenced by language barriers. The reckoning was complete. Now came the work of building something better from the ashes of Erik's destroyed reputation. Maya stood before the packed auditorium at the University of Texas, her hands steady on the podium, as she addressed the crowd of students, faculty, and professionals gathered for the inaugural conference on linguistic rights in the workplace. 6 months had passed since Erik Davidson's settlement and resignation. 6 months that had transformed Maya from reluctant whistleblower into prominent advocate for linguistic justice. "Language is power," Maya began, her voice carrying clearly through the hall. "When I documented my former CEO's Danish commentary, I thought I was building a case against one abusive individual. I didn't realize I was exposing a systematic form of discrimination that affects thousands of workers across industries." The audience was diverse: attorneys, HR professionals, academics, and employees from companies nationwide who discovered their own experiences with linguistic discrimination. Maya's case had created ripple effects across American workplaces, inspiring policy changes and legal precedents that protected workers from foreign language abuse. Rebecca Martinez sat in the front row, beaming with pride at her former client's transformation. The settlement with NordicFlow had provided Maya financial security, but more importantly, it had given her a platform to advocate for systemic change. She'd used the money to establish the Thompson Foundation for Linguistic Justice, providing legal aid to employees facing foreign language discrimination. "The psychological impact of linguistic exclusion is profound," Maya continued, drawing on research she'd commissioned with Dr. Patricia Hoffman. "When executives use foreign languages to deliver hostile messages, they create a form of gaslighting that makes victims question their own perceptions. Our foundation has documented over 200 similar cases across the United States." David Park watched from the audience, now promoted to CTO at NordicFlow under new leadership that valued transparent communication and inclusive management practices. The company had implemented comprehensive language policies and cultural sensitivity training, becoming a model for other tech firms seeking to prevent linguistic discrimination. Ashley Williams sat nearby, her business card identifying her as Director of Workplace Culture at a progressive Austin startup. Her experience with Erik's linguistic abuse had inspired a new career path focused on creating psychologically safe work environments. She consulted with companies nationwide, helping them recognize and prevent subtle forms of workplace harassment. Maya's presentation included case studies from across the country. The Houston Oil Company, where Spanish-speaking executives excluded English-only employees from decision-making conversations. The Seattle tech firm, where Mandarin commentary created a hostile environment for non-Chinese workers. The New York Financial Services Company, where French insults masked systematic gender discrimination. Each case followed the same pattern, Maya explained. Powerful individuals using linguistic knowledge as a weapon while maintaining plausible deniability. The Thompson Foundation has worked with employment attorneys in 37 states to establish legal frameworks for prosecuting linguistic discrimination. Tom Bradley had become Maya's mentor in her new role, his decades of workplace experience helping her navigate the complex politics of corporate reform. He'd testified before Congress about the need for federal legislation protecting workers from foreign language harassment, his weathered face and straightforward manner lending credibility to arguments about sophisticated discrimination tactics. During the conference's lunch break, Maya found herself surrounded by attendees sharing their own stories. A Korean-American engineer whose Japanese supervisor made cruel comments in Japanese. A Latina marketing executive whose German CEO used German to exclude Spanish speakers from strategic discussions. A Vietnamese programmer whose Cantonese-speaking manager delivered performance criticism in a language designed to humiliate. "Your courage gave us language for our experiences," one attendee told Maya. Before your case, we didn't know linguistic discrimination was a legally recognized form of harassment. Jake Rodriguez approached with his camera crew, documenting the conference for a follow-up story about the broader impact of Maya's lawsuit. His original article had won a Pulitzer Prize for investigative reporting, establishing him as a leading voice on workplace discrimination issues. Maya, how does it feel to have created an entire field of employment law? Jake asked, his microphone capturing her response for the evening news. It's overwhelming and humbling, Maya replied. I never intended to become a public figure or civil rights advocate. I just wanted to stop one person from abusing his linguistic abilities to hurt others. The fact that it's grown into a national movement suggests how widespread this problem really was. Dr. Linda Thompson watched the interview from across the room, her face glowing with maternal pride. Her daughter had transformed academic linguistic skills into a force for social justice, proving that soft skills could have profound real-world impact. The high school English teacher had become a sought-after speaker herself, addressing educators about the importance of teaching students to recognize and resist linguistic manipulation. Erik Davidson's fate served as a cautionary tale throughout the conference. His career had been destroyed not just by legal settlements, but by industry blacklisting that left him unemployable in tech. His cooperation with other linguistic discrimination cases had been grudging but legally mandated, his testimony helping convict 3 other executives of similar crimes. The final session focused on prevention and policy implementation. Maya presented the Thompson Foundation's Model Workplace Language Policies, comprehensive guidelines that protected employees, while preserving legitimate business needs for multilingual communication. The goal isn't to eliminate foreign languages from workplaces, Maya emphasized. The goal is to ensure that linguistic diversity enhances, rather than undermines, inclusive culture. Companies can celebrate multilingual capabilities while preventing linguistic abuse. As the conference ended, Maya reflected on her transformation from anxious imposter to confident advocate. Her linguistics PhD had found its perfect application, her technical skills had proven their value in new contexts, and her courage had inspired systemic change across American workplaces. Luna waited at home in their new apartment, larger now, with space for Maya's growing library of legal texts and linguistic research. The cat seemed to approve of Maya's new career, which involved more home-based writing and less stressful commuting than software engineering. Maya's phone buzzed with a message from Rebecca Martinez. Saw the news coverage of your conference. You've accomplished something extraordinary. Turned personal trauma into social justice. Erik's victims have become leaders, and his cruelty has become the foundation for protecting thousands of other workers. That evening, Maya sat at her desk working on her book, Hidden Languages, Exposing Discrimination Through Linguistic Justice, a comprehensive guide for employees, attorneys, and HR professionals dealing with foreign language harassment. The manuscript drew on her academic training, legal experience, and advocacy work to provide practical tools for recognizing and confronting linguistic discrimination. Her dedication read, "To Ashley Williams, David Park, Tom Bradley, and every employee who has felt the sting of words they couldn't understand but knew were meant to wound. Your courage to speak truth gave voice to the voiceless." Maya paused in her typing, looking out her window at Austin's skyline. Somewhere in those gleaming towers, other employees might be experiencing linguistic discrimination, feeling the familiar anxiety of hostile communication they couldn't quite comprehend. But now they had resources, legal precedents, support networks, and the knowledge that their experiences were valid and actionable. Her phone rang, the caller ID showing an international number. Maya answered to hear accented English, tentative but determined. "Miss Thompson? My name is Ingrid Larson. I work for a tech company in Copenhagen, and I read about your case online. I think I need your help. My American supervisor has been making cruel comments about Danish employees in English, assuming we don't understand idioms and cultural references. Would the Thompson Foundation consider international cases?" Maya smiled, reaching for her notepad. The fight for linguistic justice was expanding beyond American borders, carrying her mother's lesson about using education to combat injustice to workers around the globe. "Tell me your story, Ingrid. Let's see how we can help." As Maya began taking notes, Luna jumped onto her lap, settling in for what promised to be a long conversation. The work continued, one voice at a time, one story at a time, one act of courage inspiring another. Erik Davidson's legacy had become the very thing he'd tried to prevent, a world where linguistic diversity was celebrated rather than weaponized, where hidden cruelty was exposed to sunlight, and where the power of language served justice rather than oppression. Maya Thompson, former imposter, had found her authentic voice at last. And that voice was singing a song of justice that would echo through workplaces around the world for generations to come. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.